Okay, everybody. So we were talking about the blood vessels, circulation. In last lecture, I talked about the arterial system, the arteries in the body. Today, we'll talk about the veins and the capillaries. First, we'll see the major veins in the body. You already know that small veins give blood to the larger veins, right? In case of artery, it's opposite. Large arteries give blood to the smaller arteries. Okay? So, in your body, small veins collect blood from the capillary beds, capillaries, and give to the larger veins, and then the largest veins, vena cava, they give the blood to the right atrium. Make sense? Right side of the heart, which has the deoxygenated blood, right? So veins should give blood to the right side because veins bring deoxygenated blood back, right? And we know that atrium receives the blood from outside, right? Okay. So this is the venous system of the body. First, we'll see from the heart. So, what happens, this is the heart, superior and inferior vena cava. These are two largest veins. Both give the blood to the right atrium. So, this is the right atrium. Superior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood into the right atrium from the upper part of the body. Inferior vena cava gives deoxygenated blood to the right atrium from the lower part of the body. So these are two largest veins. So this is superior vena cava, this is inferior vena cava, this is right atrium. Okay. So let's see what happens to superior vena cava. You see, superior vena cava receives blood from two veins. One is subclavian vein and another is internal jugular vein. So, internal jugular and subclavian, those are two veins give the blood to the superior vena cava. You see there in the picture. Okay. Then from subclavian you get two. One is the vertebral and another is the external jugular. So this is the external jugular vein, external jugular vein, and this is the vertebral vein. Vertebral vein. So now you got both internal jugular and external jugular. This is the internal jugular giving directly blood to the superior vena cava, but external jugular is giving, which is smaller, giving blood to the subclavian vein. Make sense? So, you got two jugular, internal and external jugular, and in between you have the vertebral vein. Okay? Okay. Now, in general, internal jugular goes to the inner part of the head. It's like internal carotid. Remember, internal, external carotid. Internal gives mostly blood to the brain, right? Similarly, internal jugular is mainly for the inner part of the head. That means from the brain, deoxygenated blood is mostly received by the internal jugular vein. Okay? But a branch of internal jugular also goes to the skull, outer part of the head. Okay, we'll see that later. Just remember, external jugular mostly supplies blood to the facial part of the head, face, and the back, occipital. Right? This is the occipital area, you remember, and facial area. So here and here, mostly from the external jugular. Okay? And inner part and the skull mainly from internal jugular. Okay. Now, subclavian vein is like subclavian artery. It goes to the armpit and becomes axillary vein. Right? Here, axillary, like artery, and then goes to the arm, becomes brachial. You already know that. Brachial vein, and then divides into two in the forearm, radial vein and ulnar vein. Make sense? Here, like artery, radial and ulnar, right? Here, brachial vein, like brachial artery. Here, axillary vein, subclavian, right? So those are same as artery. Is it clear? Okay. Now, one thing is different in the upper limb. What is that? Two other large veins arise from the axillary vein. You see that in the picture. One is called cephalic vein, another is the basilic vein. In case of arterial system, you don't have those two. You don't have cephalic or basilic arteries. So, from the axillary, you get two other veins. They're pretty large. Basilic vein and cephalic vein. Okay? So, you see, in the arm, you have actually three veins, right? Brachial, cephalic, and basilic vein. Make sense? Brachial vein is a deep vein located inside the muscle, and cephalic and basilic, they are more superficial, just under the skin. So these two are superficial veins, and brachial vein is in the deeper part of the arm. You see here now, three large veins, right? This is the brachial vein, the deeper one, and this is the cephalic and basilic. Okay? Same thing in this side. Okay? And cephalic and basilic go all the way down. And in front of the elbow, here, this is cephalic, this is basilic. In front of your elbow, these two veins are connected by the median cubital vein. So, they are connected by median cubital vein. And this vein is used most of the time, we take the blood for lab test from the median cubital vein. You know that from here we collect the blood, right? So that's the median cubital vein that connects the cephalic and basilic. Here. This one. Okay, so this is cephalic, this is basilic. You see they go all the way down to the pump. But in front of the elbow, they are connected by median cubital vein. So here, you see, this is the subclavian. That means this one, right? Subclavian vein. This is the internal jugular. So subclavian, this is internal jugular. This is subclavian. And this is the vertebral vein. This is the external jugular vein. Now, you see that internal jugular, the main part of it goes inside the skull. That means towards the brain. Okay? And a branch is going to the skull here. Now let's see the external jugular. This is the external jugular. You see one branch is going to the facial part, another is going to the occipital part of the head. Okay? So internal mostly receives deoxygenated blood from the inner part of the skull, which is the brain. And subclavian then becomes axillary vein, then brachial vein, then radial, ulnar vein. Okay? Now let's see. Subclavian becomes axillary in the armpit, right? Then brachial in the arm. But now you see here more clearly, from the axillary, two other veins arise. One is the cephalic, another is the basilic vein. Okay? And in front of the elbow, they are connected by the median cubital vein. Okay? And this is the brachial, the deep one. These are superficial. Now brachial divides into radial and ulnar veins. Okay? And in the palm, radial and ulnar, they join to form arches. Okay? So two arches are formed in the palm area. One is superficial palmar venous arch, another is deep palmar venous arch. And from the venous arches, the digital veins arise. So now, remember again, everything, the blood moves from smaller towards the large. That means towards the heart, from the peripheral part towards the heart. Now, let's see the inferior vena cava. Inferior vena cava, you know, just under the heart you have the diaphragm. You already know that. So this is the diaphragm. So inferior vena cava passes through the diaphragm and mostly collects blood from the abdominal organs and lower extremities. Okay. First, we'll see what happens in the abdomen. You know, abdomen has those organs like adrenal glands, right? You have the kidneys, you have the other organs. They didn't show here. Let's see somewhere else. Here, you see other organs. So, first, like your arterial system, from the kidneys, renal veins, right and left, drain the blood into the inferior vena cava. Okay? From suprarenal glands or adrenal glands. Now, look this one carefully. The right suprarenal vein brings the blood directly into the vena cava. But left suprarenal vein gives blood not directly to the vena cava but to the right renal vein here. Then renal vein gives blood to the inferior vena cava. So it is different here. The right and left. Right one is giving directly to the vena cava, suprarenal vein, but left suprarenal vein gives blood to the left renal vein first. Okay. Okay. Now, so those are renal and suprarenal veins. Gonadal veins, like gonadal arteries, bring the deoxygenated blood from the gonads, ovaries and testes, right? Gonadal, remember that? From the gonads into the vena cava. If you see the upper part here, hepatic vein brings deoxygenated blood from the liver. Makes sense, right? Hepatic. Phrenic. Phrenic is what? Anybody? Diaphragm. You remember I said if you hear phrenic, that indicates diaphragm, right? So phrenic veins bring deoxygenated blood from the diaphragm. Hepatic from the liver. And gastric vein, this one, from the stomach. The term gastric indicates the stomach, you know that. So this is the stomach, so gastric vein, okay. Superior mesenteric and inferior mesenteric, it's like arteries, right? So you see, this is the inferior mesenteric and this is the superior mesenteric. So superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, gastric. Is it clear? Gastric from the stomach, superior mesenteric from mostly from the small intestine, and inferior mesenteric mostly from the large intestine. It's like very similar to the arterial system. Okay? So those are the main veins inside the abdomen. Okay? So first let's quickly go over again. Here you see some veins, right? Hepatic vein from the what? Hepatic vein from the liver, right? Brings deoxygenated blood from the liver, gives to the inferior vena cava. Then you have the phrenic from the diaphragm. Makes sense. Yes. Then you have renal from the kidneys, suprarenal from the adrenal glands, right? Okay, and gonadal from the gonads. Now let's go there. Gastric from the stomach, superior mesenteric mainly from the small intestine, inferior mesenteric mostly from the large intestine. Okay? Now, see one thing here. Gastric vein from the stomach, superior mesenteric and inferior mesenteric from the intestine. All those three veins give blood to this vein. This is called the hepatic portal vein. So gastric from the stomach, superior mesenteric mostly from the small intestine, inferior mesenteric mostly from the large intestine, bring the blood into the hepatic portal vein. So hepatic vein and hepatic portal vein are same or different? Different, right? This is hepatic portal, and hepatic you have seen here, right? That's a different one. Okay. So hepatic portal vein, which is also known as portal vein, receives blood from where? Stomach, small intestine, large intestine, right? And from these areas, what kind of blood is taken to the portal vein? Nutrient-rich blood, because blood from the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, nutrients enter into the blood, right? From those organs, you already know that, right? So that blood brings what? Nutrients, and gives to the hepatic portal vein. And hepatic portal vein takes that blood to the liver. That's why it is called hepatic portal. Hepatic is liver. So receive blood from small intestine, large intestine, stomach, nutrient-rich blood, and take it to the liver. Why hepatic portal vein takes the blood to the liver? Nutrient-rich blood first to the liver, because you must know liver is the organ where the nutrients are processed first. Most of the nutrients are first processed where? In the liver. That's why, right, nutrient-rich blood is taken to the liver. Okay. So if I ask you hepatic portal circulation, this is the circulation. Nutrient-rich blood from the stomach and intestine are taken to the liver. That's the hepatic portal circulation between GI tract and the liver. Okay. Now let's go to the lower end of the inferior vena cava. It's very similar to the aorta, lower end of the aorta. So lower end of inferior vena cava divides into two common iliac veins. And then each common iliac divides into external iliac vein and internal iliac vein. Make sense? Okay. Which one is bigger? What do you think? External, same as artery, right? And external goes to the leg, thigh, and internal stays here in the pelvic area. Okay? So deoxygenated blood from pelvic organs go to the internal. Is it clear? And from the lower limb to the external. Okay? Good. And external iliac, so you see here, this is right and left common iliac. Then common iliac divides into external, which is bigger, and internal, smaller. The external, internal. External goes to the thigh and becomes femoral. So you see here, external becomes femoral vein. It's a deep vein, like brachial vein of your arm. From the upper part of femoral, the longest vein of the body arises. That is the great saphenous vein. From the upper part of the thigh, it goes all the way to the foot. So that's why it is the longest vein of the body. Great saphenous, this one, which is a superficial vein, not very deep. Femoral is deep vein. Okay. From femoral, also another vein, that is the circumflex femoral. Circumflex means going around the femur. That's why it is called circumflex femoral. Anyway, so now you see what happens to the femoral vein. When it goes to the back of the knee, it is called popliteal vein, same as artery, and then gives another branch, that is the small saphenous. So in arterial system, you don't have saphenous. In venous system, you have two saphenous, great saphenous and small saphenous. Okay? Other things are very identical. So this is the small saphenous. Okay? Then you have anterior and posterior tibial veins. Look at this picture, it will be more clear. This is the back of the leg. So you see the popliteal vein. Then you get the small saphenous vein. This one, small saphenous vein, right? And then from popliteal, anterior tibial and posterior tibial. Okay? And from posterior tibial, you get the fibula. Or we can say this way, this is popliteal. From the upper part of popliteal, you get the small saphenous. Then from popliteal, you get anterior tibial, posterior tibial. And from posterior tibial, you get the fibular vein. Okay? So, in case of venous system, in the upper limb, remember, two things are additional things. One is the cephalic vein, another is the basilic vein. These are superficial veins. You don't have identical arteries. In case of leg, you have two veins extra, great saphenous and small saphenous, right? In arterial system, you don't have saphenous. So that is the difference. Now, the posterior tibial vein in the foot divides into two and then join to form the deep plantar arch. Since this is the bottom of the foot, this is the plantar surface, sole of the foot is the plantar, and top is the dorsal. So this is the plantar surface of the foot. So that's why that arch is called the plantar arch. It's formed by those two branches of posterior tibial. So you see posterior tibial divides into two plantar veins, then they join to form the arch, and then digital veins from the arch. Now, you see here the cephalic and basalic, great saphenous and small saphenous, those two join in the dorsal side of the foot and they form another arch. That's the dorsal venous arch. So, here is the plantar venous arch in the sole of the foot, and in this surface you have the dorsal venous arch. And from dorsal venous arch we get dorsal metatarsal veins. Now again, reminder that from the small veins blood is given to the larger veins. Okay. So that's the venous system in the body. Now we'll talk about the capillaries. Capillaries are the blood vessels where the exchange takes place. Through the wall of the capillaries, exchange of gases, nutrients, metabolic wastes and other chemicals take place. And capillary wall is extremely thin, which allows the chemicals easily cross or pass through the wall. Now, there are three types of capillaries. Continuous capillaries, fenestrated capillaries and sinusoidal capillaries. In three types of capillaries, the number and size of holes or pores, remember this one, is different. The number of pores is different, the size of the pores is different. Okay? Continuous capillaries are least permeable. That means the pores are smaller than other two. That's why least permeable. Fenestrated capillaries are more permeable than continuous capillaries, but less permeable than sinusoidal capillaries. Make sense? And sinusoidal capillaries have large pores and openings. That's why they are most permeable. Okay? Most permeable. First, let's see the continuous capillary. This is the wall of a continuous capillary. Now, if you see carefully, these are the squamous cells, okay? Flat squamous cells. And in between the squamous cells, you see, you have slits. But these are very narrow. Remember, these are very narrow slits. Those are called intercellular clefts. Intercellular, that means between the cells. This is one squamous cell, this is another, makes sense? So in between the cells, you have the cleft. Have you heard the word cleft? Yes? Have you heard cleft lip, palate, right? The gap, right? So slit or gap. But this is very small. That's why only small molecules or small solutes and fluid can pass through the wall of the continuous capillaries. Where you see the continuous capillaries abundant in the skin and muscle tissue. Okay, skin and muscle. Now, continuous capillaries are also present in the brain, but the wall of continuous capillaries in the brain is different than the wall of the continuous capillaries in the skin and muscles. In the brain, the wall is less permeable than skin and muscle. Make sense? In the brain, the wall of continuous capillary is what? Less permeable. Why? What do you think?
Protection.
Say loud.
Protection.
Protection, very good. Yeah, protection. Because you know that your brain tissue is very delicate, sensitive. You all know, right? Brain tissue is very sensitive. So, the wall of continuous capillary in the brain is less permeable, so toxic chemicals cannot enter into the brain. Make sense? It will not allow many chemicals enter into the brain, right? To protect the brain. That's why this wall is also called the blood-brain barrier. The barrier between the blood and the brain. Make sense? So the toxic chemicals will not be able to cross it. Okay? But nutrients, right? Glucose and other, oxygen and nutrients should be able to pass. Okay. So continuous capillaries are present in the skin, muscles, and brain, but in the brain, the wall is different, less permeable, and that wall is called the blood-brain barrier. This is the wall of a fenestrated capillary, more permeable than the continuous. Why? Because you see, you have intercellular clefts like continuous, but in addition, you have many pores in the wall. These pores are not seen in the continuous capillary wall. In the continuous capillary, you have intercellular clefts, but you do not see the pores. Here, you see, no pore. You have intercellular clefts. Here, you have intercellular clefts in between the cells as well as many pores. So this is more permeable than the continuous capillary. Where you will find the fenestrated capillaries? In the glands and intestine and kidneys. Where you can also write it down, where you need absorption, secretion, filtration, those three functions. Where you need what? Absorption, secretion, and filtration. Now you tell me, absorption occurs where? In the intestine, right? Nutrients are absorbed in the intestine, right? From the food. So intestine. Secretion occurs in the glands, right? Glands. So in the glands. And filtration occurs where? In the kidneys. You know that. Make sense? So you have the fenestrated capillaries in those three types of organs, where you need absorption, secretion, and filtration. Sinusoidal capillaries are most permeable, has large intercellular clefts and big pores. So let's see. Here, see, the intercellular clefts are very big, right? Opening, and pores are also very large. Make sense? So, large particles can easily cross the capillary wall. Where you will find the sinusoidal capillaries? Liver, bone marrow, and spleen. Now you tell me, why in these three organs? Blood cells are formed where? In the bone marrow, right? After the new blood cells are formed in the bone marrow, those blood cells should enter into the blood, right? Through the capillary wall. Make sense? So blood cells must be able to enter into the capillaries in the bone marrow. Make sense? So the openings should be bigger. Otherwise, blood cells will not be able to enter. Number two, tell me, which two organs are called the graveyards? Spleen and liver. Remember that? So, in those two organs, you have also sinusoidal capillaries. The old blood cells will get out from the blood and will die there. Make sense? Macrophages will engulf. So to enter into the capillary in the bone marrow and to get out from the capillary in the spleen and liver. Make sense? That's why you have sinusoidal capillaries in those organs. Capillary bed. I showed you in last lecture that the smallest artery is the arteriole. So this is larger than medium sized, then small artery. This is the arteriole. And from the end of the arteriole, capillaries start. Okay? So this is a capillary, this is a capillary, okay? And capillaries form networks. Okay? Networks of capillaries. That is the capillary bed. Okay? So, and the other end of the capillary, you have the venule, small vein. Okay? So this is the venule, and in between you have the capillary. Okay? As the blood passes through the capillary bed, gradually carbon dioxide enters into the blood, oxygen leaves, so blood becomes deoxygenated. So oxygenated blood enters into the capillary blood and deoxygenated blood leaves the capillary bed. Makes sense? And enters into the venous system. So this is the capillary bed. Okay. Now, in capillary bed, you will see many sphincters. Sphincters. They control the amount of blood that enters into the network or capillary bed. So you have sphincters. Let's see the capillary bed. You see the arteriole in the left side, terminal arteriole, and then the capillary bed and the venule. Okay? And these are the sphincters. These are called precapillary sphincters, and they control the amount of blood will circulate in the capillary bed. When the sphincters are constricted, less blood will enter into the capillary network. Makes sense, right? When the sphincters are relaxed, dilated, more blood will enter into the capillary bed. So sphincters are very important. Now you tell me, when you do exercise, sphincters should be constricted or relaxed? So more blood should go to the muscle, right? To the tissue. Okay. So the sphincters regulate how much blood will circulate in the capillary bed. Now you see this capillary that takes some blood directly from the arteriole to the venule. Most blood, usually in normal condition, most blood will enter into the true capillaries. These are called true capillaries. They form networks. And this one is called arteriole. The one directly takes blood, some blood from the arteriole to the venule. But most blood from arteriole enters into the true capillary or capillary networks. In last class, I explained the differences between the artery and vein. Remember, the wall is thick in artery, thin in vein. Lumen is round in artery, smaller, flat in vein, larger, and pressure is high inside the artery, pressure is low inside the vein. Arteries don't have valves, veins have valves. Remember that? I mentioned those differences between an artery and a vein. Blood pressure. I talked about blood pressure before in one of my lecture, but today I'll again quickly go over. Blood pressure is the lateral pressure exerted on the blood vessel or arterial wall while the blood passes through it. So this is the artery. Main pressure is this way along the artery, but also while the blood is passing, some pressure falls on the wall of the artery, and that pressure we measure, and that is the blood pressure. So that's why we say lateral pressure, not the longitudinal pressure. Okay, and measured, and the unit of blood pressure is millimeter of mercury. Okay, and we measure both systolic and diastolic. Systolic pressure is during the contraction of the heart when more blood is inside the artery, right? Pressure is high. When heart relaxes, most of the blood gets back, right? So in the artery, you have less blood, pressure is less. So we measure both. I mentioned before how to get the pulse pressure, which is the difference between systolic and diastolic, very simple, and MAP or mean arterial pressure is diastolic plus 1/3 of pulse pressure. Okay? I also mentioned that 3 factors directly influence the blood pressure. One is the volume of blood. If volume is more, blood pressure is more. Makes sense? Cardiac output is the force of contraction of the heart. Okay? Depends on what? Force of contraction. Look at me. If the force is more, output will be more, right? Blood will get out more. So cardiac output is how much blood is getting out in 1 minute, right? So that depends on how forcefully the heart is contracting. Okay, so that is another thing. So if cardiac output is more, blood pressure is more. And peripheral resistance. Peripheral is related to heart or blood vessels? Blood vessels, right? Peripheral. Center is the heart, right? Peripheral is the blood vessel. So peripheral resistance is the resistance the blood is getting in the arteries, okay? The wall of the artery. Now you tell me, I explained you before, this artery has more elasticity, this one has no elasticity, okay? So when the same amount of blood will try to enter, this one will expand, right? This one will not, stay narrow. So pressure on this one will be more. Make sense? So elasticity is one main factor, right, of peripheral resistance. If the elasticity is less, resistance is more, pressure is high. Is it clear? Pressure is high. If elasticity is more, right, then the resistance is less, pressure is low. Okay. Now you tell me what can increase the hardening of the wall. One is, or narrowing of the lumen. One is accumulation of fat, right? Atherosclerosis. And another is when you get old or if you smoke a lot, okay, the elastic fibers gradually becomes fibrous tissue. Elasticity is lost. So arteries will not be able to expand. Make sense? So that is called hardening of the wall. That is arteriosclerosis. 2 different things. Atherosclerosis is fat. The lumen is getting narrow, right? And arteriosclerosis is the elastic fibers are getting less in the wall. It's hardening of the wall. Both will increase the peripheral resistance, that means the blood pressure. Regulation, I talked about it before, so you just follow my last lecture. Regulation, I mentioned at that time, you have nervous regulation, right? You You have baroreceptors, remember, in the arterial wall, aortic arch, bifurcation of common carotid. In this area, you have baroreceptors. When the pressure changes, the receptors can detect and send signal to the cardiac centers. Okay, and then cardiac centers send signal back to the heart. If blood pressure is low, then it will tell the heart to pump more forcefully. Is it clear? And will constrict the arteries, narrow the arteries. Okay, so that way the blood pressure will go up. You now know how the blood pressure can be controlled, right? Increasing the force of contraction, you can increase the blood pressure, increase the peripheral resistance, you can increase the blood pressure. Hormonal regulation, some hormones. Angiotensin 2, I explained in last class. Angiotensin 2, how the angiotensin 2 is produced. You remember in your blood you have angiotensinogen, and angiotensinogen is converted to angiotensin 1